Okay, so more about alcoholism. What is this chapter? Why do I actually need God? The theory of God sounds great, but why do I need God? Well, this chapter is designed specifically to show me why I need God in my life. It is designed to show the type of thinking that precedes the first drink, what kind of thoughts go through my head right before I pick up the first drink. And this chapter will kind of detail that, and hopefully I can bring to the surface and show you how quickly and how insane the first drink thought comes in and how we have no effective mental defense. I always hear in the program, I play the tape forward, and then I don't drink. I play the tape forward and I don't drink. I think about the consequences, then I don't drink. Well, if you pay attention to the literature, at a certain point, that won't work. At a certain point in the drinking of every alcoholic, he has no effective mental defense against the first drink. His defense must come from a higher power. That's the whole point of that. You can play the tape forward 100 times in a row, but on the 101st time, when you have no effective mental defense, then what? You're fucking drunk. That's why we need God. God will match the insane thought to drink with the sane thought to not drink. But that only happens if you're in fit spiritual condition and you have God working in your life. And notice how I said working in your life. God has to be working in your life. He just can't be the theory in your life that you start your day and end your day with and think I'm all spiritually connected. Too many people drink because of that theory. God has to be working in our lives 24 hours a day. And then, so the second part on this chapter is why I need God. This chapter will show me and show you why we need God. What type of thinking God will match the insane thought with the sane thought. Okay. More about alcoholism. Most of us have been unwilling to admit that we are real alcoholics. No person likes to think he is bodily and mentally different from his fellows. Therefore, it is not surprising that our drinking careers have been characterized by countless vain attempts to prove we could drink like other people. The idea that somehow, someday, he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal alcoholic or drinker. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. Many pursue it to the gates of insanity or death. Okay, I'm going to rewind. The idea that somehow, someday, he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. If you're trying to control and enjoy your drinking, first off, it's abnormal. Normal people don't try to control and enjoy their drinking. They just drink, and they don't try to control it. So that's like your first sign. If you're trying to control or enjoy it, it's fucking abnormal. Okay? Period. So there's a pretty good sign you might have a problem. The persistence of this illusion. An illusion is something that looks like true, but it's not, right? The persistence of this lie is astonishing. Many pursue it to the gates of insanity or death. We read in the last chapter, I had two choices. I pick up this kit of spiritual tools laid at my feet, or the other option is that I die an alcoholic death. That's kind of the ultimatum for the alcoholic drug addict. And if you don't die like 6 feet under, we all know what it's like being the walking dead. And I don't want to live like that anymore. I remember looking in the mirror, looking into my eyes going, who are you? What have you become? And anyone who has kids who's had that experience, it's a pretty shameful look in the mirror. Day after day after day. Trying to play with your kids with that deep guilt and shame that you feel because you don't even know who you are or what's going on. Next line. We learned that we had to concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. It's a very important line too. We learned. So I just don't admit that I'm an alcoholic and concede to my innermost self. This is a process of learning. How do I learn? Well, by countless vain attempts to control and enjoy my drinking. I learned through major trips to the detox centers, maybe even one. I learned through, my family over and over telling me, you should quit drinking. I learn through, bar fights. I learn through friends turning away from me. I learn in many different ways, but I do learn that I have to surrender and concede to my innermost self that I am an alcoholic. And I can admit all I want, but until I have the deep level concession that I'm fucked, that this thing has me, and that there's no other solution than this higher power thing, because there isn't, in my opinion. The doctor's opinion says it very well. Very little chance of your recovery if you don't have something grounded in a power greater than yourself. So I learned that I had to fully concede to my innermost self that I was an alcoholic. This is the first step in recovery. Step one, if you're sponsoring, this is where you give them step one, essentially. Okay? You finish the chapter, but you ask them, have you conceded your innermost self? Are you actually done? And do you believe you're an alcoholic? They say yes. The best you can do is you move on, you give them step one, and you finish this chapter. The delusion that we are like other people, or presently may be, has to be smashed. There's the first delusion in the big book. That's the first delusion, and that's the one that we talk about the most. But that's not the one I'm going to focus on the most. But this delusion has to be smashed. I have to smash the delusion that I'm ever able to safely use drugs or alcohol or any mind or mood altering substance again for this alcoholic in my life. That delusion has to be smashed. There can be no lurking notion. There can be no maybe someday. I have to smash the delusion. But there's another delusion that's way more important, in my opinion. And then I never will think about this delusion. But it's the delusion of that I'm a victim of the delusion that I can wrest happiness and satisfaction out of this world if I only manage well. It's in step 3. That delusion is the one that needs to be smashed, because that is the one, if I smash, I start actually knowing how to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. But this one is important too for anyone that's new, that still struggles with the substance. We alcoholics are men and women who have lost the ability to control our drinking. We know that no real alcoholic ever recovers control. All of us felt at times that we were regaining control, but such intervals, usually brief, were inevitably followed by still less control, which led in time to pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. We are convinced to a man that alcoholics of our type are in the grip of progressive illness. Over any considerable period, we get worse, never better. If you're an alcoholic and you've crossed the line in your drinking career, it will never get better. It will only get worse. And you might have already stopped a couple times, like it says right here. All of us felt at times we were regaining control. And then you get a bit of confidence. But such intervals, usually brief, were inevitably followed by still less control, or even a worse relapse. More guilt, more shame. That's just the way it goes with alcoholics. It never gets better. And it's a progressive fatal illness. It only gets worse, and it can lead to death. And I see it all the time. I don't know if any of you know any alcoholics or drug addicts that have died, but if I asked you all to put up your hand, I guarantee all of you would put up your hand a minimum once, and some of you would put your hand up about 10 times, because this disease kills. So we are like men who have lost their legs. They never grow new ones. Neither does there appear to be any kind of treatment which will make alcoholics of our kind like other men. We have tried every unimaginable remedy. In some instances, there has been brief recovery, followed always by still a worse relapse. And that's important too. I just talked about it. Everybody has stopped. And you get a bit of recovery, you get a bit of time, but then it's always followed by still a worse relapse. It's always worse. It's always worse. So if you relapse again, just remember, I'm telling you, it'll never get better. It'll always get worse. But the thing with the alcoholic is we're kind of screwed up in the sense that one time that it wasn't that bad, we'll hold on to that one time where, holy, I only drank 5 drinks and I made it to bed. Maybe I'm not an alcoholic. But the 35 other times before it, you forget about, right? It's hilarious how that works. Physicians who are familiar with alcoholism agree there is no such thing as making a normal drinker out of an alcoholic. Science may one day accomplish this, but it hasn't done so yet. Despite all we can say, many who are real alcoholics are not going to believe they're in that class. So I like that line, despite all we can say. So we just had a chapter, doctor's opinion, we had Bill's story, we had there's a solution, and now we're starting more about alcoholism. So we've talked a lot about alcoholism, the substance, the craving, and the obsession already. And the book is saying, despite all we can say, there are still many people who are real alcoholics who are not going to believe they're in that class. By every form of self-deception and experimentation, they will try to prove themselves exceptions to the rule, therefore non-alcoholic. And one of the biggest things that I see is if you're able to make money and keep a job, you will convince yourself you're not alcoholic. That is the worst thing to keep a drug addict alcoholic still using, is they're still able to make money. They can have every other symptom in the book, but if they're able to make money, they will by every form of experimentation and self-deception is that one, they will deem themselves not alcoholic. They try to prove themselves exceptions to the rule, therefore non-alcoholic. If anyone who is showing the inability to control his drinking can do the right about face and drink like a gentleman, our hats are off to him. Heaven knows we have tried hard enough and long enough to drink like other people. Here are some of the methods we have tried. Drinking beer only, limiting the number of drinks, never drinking alone, drinking in the morning, drinking only at home, never having it in the house, never drinking during business hours, drinking only at parties, switching from scotch to brandy, drinking only natural wines, agreeing to resign if ever drunk on the job, taking a trip, not taking a trip, swearing off forever with and without a solemn oath, taking more physical exercise, reading inspirational books, going to health farms and sanitariums, accepting voluntary commitment to asylums. We can increase the list ad infinitum. We do not like to pronounce an individual as an alcoholic, but you can quickly diagnose yourself. Okay, so we get into this part of the book. Bill, the author, is going to give you 2 ways to try to prove yourself an alcoholic. By every form of self-deception, experimentation, I will try to prove myself non-alcoholic. Well, Bill goes into 2 ways to try to see if you are an alcoholic. And here's the first one. Step over to the nearest bar room. Or step over your nearest crack pipe. Try some controlled drinking or smoking crack. Try to drink and stop abruptly, more than once. It will not take you long for you to decide if you're honest with yourself about it. And it may be worth a bad case of the jitters if you get a full knowledge of your condition. And that's important. I've worked with many sponsees that, maybe they doubted it. And I'm like, well, there's nothing I can really do until you know that you are. And, here's $20. I'll get you started. Go to the nearest dope dealer. Grab some crack. Try some controlled crack using. And then call me tomorrow or in a week. Or if you die first, I guess you won't be calling me. But try some controlled using or drinking. Why? Because they need to get a full knowledge of their condition. And that's the beauty of being a sponsor. I can predict their future for them, and I can lay out how everything's going to go, because that's how it went for me, and that's how it goes for everybody. And when you sponsor as many people as I has, you see that this is black and it's white. There's no gray area. The gray area is almost non-existent. And so I've developed my theories based on my experience that the book is 100% right, but the thing with the alcoholic is they think they're unique. They think they're unique and that they're a little different than the next guy. So with my experience, I smash that with a lot of my sponsees, because they usually come to me because they know, they think they know that I'm talking about, they think they know that I'm confident in what I believe based on my experience. So they believe what I say. So I don't get some of the pushback that some sponsors do because these guys believe me, because I'm so emphatic with my deportment and my body language, because I just know. I just see it. And so a lot of them kind of will get in the line a little bit. Anyway, so I need them to get a full knowledge of their condition. If they don't have a knowledge of their condition, then they're just going to keep on trying. Though there is no way of proving it, we believe that early in our drinking careers, most of us could have stopped drinking. But the difficulty is that few alcoholics have enough desire to stop while there is yet time. Yeah, if I would have known, I wouldn't have stopped because I still enjoyed it at that time. And I don't know when I crossed the line, but once I crossed the line, there's no coming back. We have heard of a few instances where people who showed definite signs of alcoholism were unable to stop for a long period because of an overpowering desire to do so. Here's one. A man of 30 was doing a great deal of spree drinking. He was very nervous in the morning. After these bouts, he had quieted himself with more liquor. He was ambitious to succeed in business, but saw that he would get nowhere if he ever drank at all. Once he started, he had no control whatever. He made up his mind that until he had been successful in business and had retired, he would not touch another drop. An exceptional man, he remained bone dry for 25 years and retired at the age of 55. After a successful and happy business career, then he fell victim to a belief which practically every alcoholic has, that his long period of sobriety and his self-discipline had qualified him to drink as other men. Out came his carpet slippers and a bottle. In 2 months, he was in a hospital, puzzled and humiliated. He tried to regulate his drinking for a while, making several trips to the hospital in the meantime. Then, gathering all of his forces, he attempted to stop altogether and found he could not. Every means of solving his problem which money could buy was at his disposal. Every attempt failed. Though a robust man at retirement, he went to pieces quickly and was dead within 4 years. So, I don't really like this story. When I sponsor people, I get through this story as quick as possible. I don't even touch on this story. This is actually my story, though. I quit drinking at 22, started smoking crack at 35, and I was off to the races with a period of sobriety in the middle, but it was miserable. But I don't talk about this story because this story will give a typical alcoholic who wants an out, this story gives them the out. Because this guy quit on his own. And until he had been successful in business, then he decided to drink again. So it gives a guy false hope that he might be able to quit on his own. But the facts are that almost nobody can quit on their own, for one. But if you give that idea to an alcoholic, he'll think, oh, I don't need this. I think I can maybe do this on my own. So I never really talk about this story at all. But I just gave you some inside info. But for me, I did quit drinking at 22 on a prayer. And then I smoked crack, not willingly, at 35 or 36. And I didn't know that I had set off the phenomenon of craving in my body. And I came back to Calgary because I was looking for my brother in Winnipeg. So I was looking for my brother. He was a missing persons. And this crack street guy said, I know where your brother is. Come with me and I'll show you where he is so you can, save him. So I went with this guy and he said, here, before you come into this house, you have to have a hoot of crack. So I took a couple hoots of crack because they wouldn't let me go in and look for my brother unless I did. And then when I got back to Calgary a month later, that next week, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I could not stop thinking about crack. And I actually hated crack. And I used to have guys that worked for me, and if I knew they were smoking it, I'd fire them. But after about a month of this obsession, I ended up going to find some. And then that started my next downward spiral with drugs. And I burnt my life to the ground within about 5.5 years, to the point where I lost my house, my business that I built for 15 years. I lost my family. I lost everything. And I was essentially homeless. But that's the power of the phenomenon of craving. I had a space in there for years and years. I set it off and I didn't even know it. And then it just took over my life. And I went on a 5-year spree and burnt my life to the ground. Made my family homeless, the whole 9 yards. So this case contains a powerful lesson. Most of us have believed that if we remain sober for a long stretch, we could thereafter drink normally. But here was a man who at 55 years found he was just where he had left off at 30. We have seen the truth demonstrated again and again. Once an alcoholic drug addict, always an alcoholic drug addict. Commencing to drink after a period of sobriety, we are in short time as bad as ever. If we are planning to stop drinking or using, there must be no reservation of any kind, nor any lurking notion that someday we will be immune to alcohol. Which is why I need the full knowledge of my condition. If I don't have a full knowledge of my condition, I may think that I can do this again. There might be a lurking notion in the back of my mind that maybe someday. Young people may be encouraged by this man's experience to think that they can stop as he did on their own willpower. We doubt if many of them can do it, because none will really want to stop, and hardly one of them, because of the peculiar mental twist already acquired, will find that they can win out. And that peculiar mental twist already acquired is you've crossed the line and you can't uncross the line. Okay? I'll get more into that at some point too. Several of our crowd, men of 30 or less, had been drinking only a few years, but they found themselves as hopeless as those who had been drinking 20 years. To be gravely affected, one does not necessarily have to drink a long time, nor take the quantities some of us have. This is particularly true of women. Potential female alcoholics often turn into the real thing and are gone beyond recall in a few years. And that is definitely true as well. I see that happen a lot. A lot of women don't even start drinking till 25 or 30, and they're desperately ill by 35 or 40. And I don't know why, but it really, really kicks women's asses. Certain drinkers who would be greatly insulted if called alcoholics are astonished at their inability to stop. We are who familiar with the symptoms see large numbers of potential alcoholics among young people everywhere, but try and get them to see it. As we look back, we feel we had gone on drinking many years beyond the point where we could quit on our own power. If anyone questions whether he has entered into this dangerous area, let him try leaving liquor alone for a year. Okay, so here's the second way to prove to yourself to get a full knowledge of your condition. It's going to talk to me about trying to leave liquor alone for a year. And again, the book is bang on. I see people come in the program all the time. They get a few months. My theory is God opens a window for us to come in. We get so desperate and we get so beaten. And then we have no problem staying sober for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, sometimes even 6 or 8 months. But if anyone knows the term by the grace of God, what that term means is undeserved gift. And so these people come in and they think, well, I'm sober and it's not that hard. And I think you guys are making too hard a work of a simple matter. I think I'm able to kind of do this a little easier. And I don't know if I really need to put the work that you guys are putting in. And what's actually happening is they've been given a grace of God, sobriety, and it's a gift of God because they haven't done anything and they don't understand that window closes. And I know so many people that have come in and gotten the 3 months, 6 months, 8 months, and then they're drunk and they're like, how did that happen? Well, I know how it happened. You had an undeserved gift from God. You've done fuck all, and you get drunk. That's just the way it goes. So if anyone is in this room and you got 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, you're not doing anything, you're not working your steps, it's a very slippery slope, okay? And the book says, doubtful you'll make it a year. I agree with the book. I doubt you're going to make it a year. And if you make it a year, you won't make it 2. You won't make it 2. And the other thing I see is a lot of people come in and they're like, well, I need to wait and get well before I do the steps. I got to feel good before I do this work. And really? No, you do the steps and get well. But we think we know everything. We think we know how to run our own lives and I know what's best for me. Time and time again, I see so many alcoholics come into the rooms and they're like, no, I need to get well before I work the steps. My opinion is no, work the steps and get well. In the back of the book, Jim, can you hit your mic, bro? In the back of the book, it talks about what happens in a few months could never have happened with years of me trying on my own. So it's given me a time frame, few months. 3 months. I should be able to get through a set of steps in 3 or 4 months. And if I don't, this will never happen by me doing it on my own. It just doesn't work. We need God. We need sponsorship. We need the path. We need the meetings. We kind of need all of this stuff together. It's not just one or two things. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. And the path consists of sponsorship and consists of whatever service, consists of going to meetings, consists of being in the literature. It consists of prayer. It consists of meditation. Like there's a few staples that are like non-negotiables. And if you follow this path, never have we seen a person fail. But too many people want to kind of separate the program from their regular life, and they have two separate lives. They have their program life, and they have Alcoholics Anonymous life. And they go to the meetings, and then they go back to the regular life, and they don't blend the two. Well, in how it works, it talks about, I'm just going to read it. Those who do not recover, tells me right there, there's a promise. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. And I implore you, make this program number one, regardless of what your pride and your mind tells you, and just watch how everything in your life falls into place. This is a spiritual program. And if you're working with the world of the Spirit wants everything in your life to work out, and you don't need to separate it. And it will work out way better than you trying to manage and fit this in somewhere. And the guys that try to fit in recovery into their life, they get drunk. It's just the way it goes, man. It's just the way it goes. And that's why I'm so confident in saying it, because that's what I see. If you don't make this number one, there is no number twos. If you're the real deal alcoholic and you don't make this number one, there's no number twos later on. That's my experience. So if anyone questions whether he has entered into this dangerous area, let him try leaving liquor alone for a year. If he is a real alcoholic and very far advanced, there is scant chance of success. In the early days of our drinking, we occasionally remained sober for a year or more. Yeah, earlier, before I crossed the line. Becoming serious drinkers later again. Though you may be able to stop for a considerable period, you may yet be a potential alcoholic. We think few to whom this book will appeal can stay dry anything like a year. Some will be drunk the day after making their resolutions, most of them within a few weeks. And that's the truth. And the other thing is I don't want to scare you. I'm not trying to scare you, but I kind of am. Making this program is important, but a lot of people are probably bristling with antagonism going I don't want to do that for the rest of my life. But for you who are saying that or thinking that or feeling that, you don't have any idea of really what the gifts of God and what the gifts of working with others and the gifts of service, you don't actually understand the gift that this program is. It just seems like it's a sentence. This is one of the greatest gifts that you'll ever be offered in your life. And if you can take this as a gift and do the work for 2 or 3 years and really dig in, your life will change in ways that you can't imagine. So stay open-minded and trust that I'm saying that. And I know I could probably pick a few people on here that would agree with me and have my back in that area. And I know tons of people that this program has changed their life. One of the promises in We Agnostic is we have had revolutionary change in our outlook towards life, towards our fellows, and towards God's universe. And the revolutionary change is all positive. It's amazing. I can't even put it into words, what I'm trying to say. So if you're bristling with antagonism or you're here thinking that this is a sentence or I'm conditioned, I have to go to Alcoholics Anonymous, be lucky, be grateful. And you don't even know what to be grateful for. So all I'm saying is, just stay on track, stay on board. Believe what I'm telling you, because what I'm telling you is not a lie. This stuff will change your life, And it will be way more than not drinking a drug. And you won't ever want to drink a drug once you get in touch with taste God. And once you taste God, like really taste God, nothing else will ever do. That's my experience. And you won't ever want to go back to that way of life anyway. For those who are unable to drink moderately, the question is how to stop altogether. We're assuming, of course, that the reader desires to stop. Whether such a person can quit upon a non-spiritual basis depends upon to the extent which he has already lost the power to choose whether he will drink or not. So a heavy drinker can drink, make, or stop on a non-spiritual basis. But the real alcoholic almost never can stop drinking without a power. That's just the way it is. But there is the odd circumstance where CBD, cognitive behavioral therapy, or another method might work for some people, but it's so small. And when you look at the doctor's opinion, the doctor says, we have found nothing. And this is a doctor who spent his whole life in the addiction alcoholic field. He says, we have found nothing that has contributed more to the rehabilitation of these type of people than this fellowship growing up about them. God works. But you got to want God. But what I do know is about half our original fellowship were atheist or agnostic. And even the head of the atheist society was alcoholic, and they have all come to believe, right? So I don't know much about what you're talking about, but I do know that atheists and alcoholics or agnostics are all through the program, and many of them have been converted. And I'm going to kind of step out of line here and say I've worked with so many agnostics in the program, and I take them through the We Agnostics chapter. They're not agnostics. Most people aren't really agnostics, but because we're stubborn, we'll hold on to the philosophy or the idea because it's part of our personality. It's part of our identity. But that's just my opinion. Most agnostics aren't really agnostics in my opinion. And that's why it works, because they're not really agnostic, but they're going to hold on to that. And I don't mean to offend any agnostics in here if you're agnostic. That's not what I'm trying to do. And I've taken them through the We Agnostics chapter. Boom, they're not agnostics anymore. And the whole chapter, We Agnostics, is designed to smash the idea that you're agnostic, right? And it's worked every time for the guys that I've taken through. But like I said, a lot of this is my opinion, and I don't want to piss people off, but I'm not afraid to really tell you my truth either. Anyway, and just to talk about the doctor's opinion, the Dr. Silkworth and his colleagues had spent their whole life. The Dr. Silkworth was in his 60s, I think, when he wrote the doctor's opinion. He spent his whole life dedicated to alcoholic and drug addiction. And I'm just going to read a piece here. Later, he requested the privilege. So the doctor is saying, okay, many years ago, one of the leading contributors to this book came under care in our hospital. So the doctor's talking about Bill W. While here, he had acquired some ideas which he put into practical application at once. So Bill W. had already been part of the Oxford group. The Oxford group was a bunch of guys that were trying to get people sober through a 6-step program. But Bill started putting together a bunch of little pieces. And he knew the Dr. Silkworth. And Dr. Silkworth's theory was that there is the theory that we have an allergy to alcohol interests us. The doctor came up with the theory of the allergy, and he put together the obsession and the spiritual malady. Why? Because he watched this over and over and over, and he was like, fuck, there's something to this. So when he wrote the doctor's opinion, it was just a theory. In 1955, it became fact, and it was accepted as alcoholism is a disease based on the Dr. Silkworth's theory. So Bill W. comes in his third treatment, and I'll read what happens. So he comes under care in the hospital, and while here, he acquired some ideas which he put into practical application at once. Later, Bill W., he requested the privilege of being allowed to tell his story to other patients. And with some misgiving, so the doctors are like, well, I don't know. Okay, we're going to let you have a crack at it. Let's watch what happens. With some misgiving, we consented. The cases we had followed, though, through have been most interesting. In fact, many of them are amazing. So the doctor's saying, we're watching this guy. Look what he's doing. He's talking, one alcoholic talking to another. He's like, this is friggin' amazing. I've spent my whole life in this field, and this guy waltzes in here with this little theory of one alcoholic talking to another. He's like, this is amazing. In fact, many of them are amazing. The unselfishness of these men as we have come to know them, the entire absence of profit motive in their community spirit is indeed inspiring. To one, the doctor who has labored long and wearily in this alcoholic field. They believe in themselves, and still more in the power which pulls chronic alcoholics back from the gates of death. So your alcoholic who's been 12-stepped and now carrying the message, they believe in themselves, but they believe way more in the power that pulls them back from the gates of death. And we're talking about God. And as you develop this relationship with God, it just becomes to a point where it's unbelievable. Anyway, I'll keep going here on page 34. Whether such a person can quit upon a non-spiritual basis depends upon to the extent which they have already lost the power to choose whether they will drink or not. Many of us felt that we had plenty of character. There was a tremendous urge to cease forever. Okay, I want to talk about that. Many of us felt we had plenty of character. Why that's important is because even though you might be an upstanding citizen, you might have a great job, a great standing, you might be a great father, you might be an honest, integral man, it doesn't matter. Alcoholism doesn't differentiate your character. So that's important. Okay? Many of us felt we had plenty of character. There was a tremendous urge to cease forever, yet we found it impossible. This is the baffling feature of alcoholism as we know it. This utter inability to leave it alone, no matter how great the necessity or the wish. And I bet you that line strikes home to most of you here. The utter inability to leave it alone, no matter how great the necessity. I have to leave it alone because I keep abandoning my kids. I keep missing work. I keep whatever it is that you keep doing. You have to leave it alone. Or you wish you could leave it alone, but you find yourself picking up a drink at some point. And although you may be able to space it out for 2 weeks and think you're kind of there, one day it kicks in so hard that you find you're drinking again. Or you made some type of excuse that night that allowed you to drink. But if I really asked you, well, why'd you drink? You knew you had a problem. You'll go, you're going to give me one of 100 plausible excuses. One of them, 2 of them, 3 of them might make sense. But really, when you get to the heart of heart, you really don't know why you picked up the drink. It's because you have no effective mental defense. Page 101, working with others. Assuming we are spiritually fit, we can do all sorts of things alcoholics are not supposed to do. People have said we must not go where liquor is served. We must not have it in our homes. We must shun friends who drink. We must avoid moving pictures which show drinking scenes. We must not go into bars. Our friends must hide their bottles if we go to their houses. We mustn't think or be reminded about alcohol. Our experience shows that this is not necessarily so. We meet these conditions every day. An alcoholic who cannot meet them still has an alcoholic mind. There is something the matter with his spiritual status. I'm going to go down one paragraph. In our belief, any scheme of combating alcoholism which proposes to shield the sick man from temptation is doomed to failure. If the alcoholic tries to shield himself, he may succeed for a time, but he usually winds up in a bigger explosion than ever. We have tried these methods. These attempts to do the impossible have always failed. So it's just a hammer home of being in fit spiritual condition. You don't need to shield or be on guard, because with God working in your life, you can do anything, if you have good reason. So the bottom paragraph. So our rule is not to avoid a place where there's drinking if you have a legitimate reason for being there. That includes bars, nightclubs, dances, receptions, weddings, even plain old whoopee parties. If you got a whoopee party to go to, you can go. Just make sure you're in fit spiritual condition and you have a legitimate reason for being there. I'm here to focus on the spiritual malady. To me, the spiritual malady is what needs to be medicated. If I'm medicating the spiritual malady with God in my life, I get the sense of ease and comfort that I would get from any drug or drink. I get it from God. And then I'm able to match the insane thought if it ever comes with the sane thought, because I have a God working in my life. So this is the baffling feature of alcoholism as we know it, this utter inability to leave it alone no matter how great the necessity or the wish. How then shall we help our alcoholic readers determine to their own satisfaction whether they are one of us? The experiment of quitting for a period of time will be helpful, but we think we can render even a greater service to alcoholic sufferers and perhaps to the medical fraternity. So we shall describe some of the mental states that precede the relapse into drinking. For obviously this is the crux of the problem. We talk about earlier in the book, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind. Maybe, and here we talk about also the crux of the problem is going to center in his mind. A lot of why we pick up, because shit builds up in our mind and we do need relief. The main trigger typically is going to come from the mind. And it's going to become, because so much shit's piling up and we need relief and we need it now. I'm restless, irritable, and discontent unless I can again experience the ease and comfort that comes at once by taking the first few drinks or the first few hoots. And then I set off the phenomenon of craving because I get the ease and comfort that comes at once by taking it. So what do I need to kind of combat? I need to combat the restless, irritable, and discontentness. So what sort of thinking dominates an alcoholic who repeats time after time the desperate experiment of the first drink? Friends who have reasoned with him after a spree which has brought him to the point of divorce or bankruptcy are mystified when he walks directly into a saloon. Why does he? What is he thinking? Our first example is a friend we shall call Jim. So there's two stories in this book. There's Jim's story and there's Fred's story. These stories are so important. They are us. These are us. So if you've ever read these stories and you just read them as two guys in the big book that Bill wrote about, I want you to reread these and really look at yourself in these, because these stories are us, okay? The first example is a friend we shall call Jim. This man has a charming wife and a family. He inherited a lucrative automobile agency. He had a commendable World War record. He is a good salesman. Everybody likes him. He is an intelligent man, normal so far as we can tell. We told him what we knew of alcoholism, the answer we had found. He made a beginning. His family was reassembled, and he began to work as a salesman for the business that he had lost through drinking. So I'm going to stop on the line where it says he made a beginning. On page 63, where the step 3 is, we found it very desirable to take this spiritual step. It's right after the step 3 prayer where you get step 3 with an understanding person such as our wife, best friend, or spiritual advisor. But it is better to meet God alone than with one who might misunderstand. The wording was, of course, quite optional, so long as we expressed the idea, voicing it without reservation. This was only a beginning. So I'm connecting the dots. Jim did step 3. That's all that he did. He made a beginning. His family was reassembled. Yeah, because things always get better when you just stop drinking. His family's reassembled. He began to work as a salesman for the business that he had lost through drinking. Very important line. All went well for a time. Because when you first come in here, by the grace of God, everything goes better for a time. It always gets better. Always. When you put down the drink and the drug. But what happened to Jim? He failed to enlarge his spiritual life. Boom. To his consternation, he found himself drunk a half a dozen times in rapid succession. If you don't enlarge your spiritual life, you get drunk. If you take the program as theoretical and don't take the action part, you get drunk. It's just the way it goes. We talk about in working with others. It's a line. It's a prayer. Faith alone is insufficient. To be vital, it must be accompanied by self-sacrifice and unselfish constructive action. That's the truth. The program is about this faith, but it's insufficient just to have prayer and meditation. It must be accompanied by self-sacrifice. understanding what self-sacrifice means, and it doesn't mean I just donate my time. Donating my time is unselfish, constructive action. Self-sacrifice means, and we'll get way more into that in the next couple sessions, is I sacrifice my selfishness, my self-seeking, my selfish fear, and what I do in life for the benefit of you. But I can't just sacrifice that on my own, because it's a lot of deep ingrained behaviors. And psychic change is I change and I sacrifice. And we'll get way more into that later. But that's the hugest part of the design for living, if you ask me. To his consternation, he found himself drunk a half a dozen times in rapid succession. On each of these occasions, we worked with him, reviewing carefully what had happened. Jim agreed he was a real alcoholic and in serious condition. He knew that he faced another trip to the asylum if he kept on. Moreover, he would lose his family for whom he had deep affection. So that goes for every one of us. We always have something at risk. And Jim knew he was going to face another trip to the asylum. He knew he was going to lose his family. He knows all these things. He's been given sufficient enough reason to stop or moderate. But Jim can't stop or moderate given all of these reasons. He can't remember with sufficient force the pain, the suffering of a day, a week, or a month ago. He was without defense against the first drink. Next page. Yet he got drunk again. Of course he did, because he's only on step 3. And if you're on step 3, you ain't on step 3, you're on step 2. Because step 3 doesn't mean anything until you're done step 4. It says it in the book, and my experience tells me that's the truth. We asked him to tell us exactly how this happened. So I'm going to read this, and then I'm going to go back, and I'm going to point out some things. So we asked him to tell us exactly how this happened. Here's his story. I came into work Tuesday morning. I remember I felt irritated that I had to be a salesman for a concern that I once owned. I had a few words with the boss, but nothing serious. Then I decided to drive to the country and see one of my prospects for a car. Okay, I'm going to stop there, go to the top. So Jim is suffering a spiritual malady right off the top of this page. He comes into work Tuesday morning. He remembers he felt irritated. So he's already restless, irritable, and discontented soon as he pops into the office. He had to be a salesman for a concern that he once owned. He's living in resentment right there. He used to own this place, now he's got to work there. So now he's in resentment too. He had a few words with the boss, so let's speak off to the boss a bit, but nothing serious. Let's sweep that shit under the carpet. Just like a typical alcoholic, but nothing serious. So I just want to highlight, Jim has spiritual malady written all over him. Right? Untreated alcoholism, spiritual malady. Then he decided to drive to the country to see one of my prospects for a car. On the way, I felt hungry, so I stopped at a roadside place where they have a bar. I had no intention of drinking. I just thought I would get a sandwich. I also had the notion that I might find a customer for a car at this place, which I was familiar for. I had been going to it for years. I had eaten there many times during the months I was sober. I sat down at the table, ordered a sandwich and a glass of milk. Still no thought of drinking. I ordered another sandwich and decided to have another glass of milk. Suddenly, the thought crossed my mind that if I were to put an ounce of whiskey in my milk, it couldn't hurt me on a full stomach. So I ordered a whiskey and poured it into the milk. I vaguely sensed I wasn't being any too smart, but I felt reassured I was taking the whiskey on a full stomach. The experiment went so well that I ordered another whiskey and poured it into more milk. That didn't seem to bother me, so I tried another. So as soon as he puts it in his body, now he's not drinking to escape anymore. He's drinking to overcome a physical craving beyond his mental control. But it looks like to Jim that he's just picking up a second drink, picking up a third drink, because that's what it looks like. And my mind tells me I'm picking up all these drinks. But really, why do I pick up 20 drinks? Because I don't have a choice in the matter. Once I put the first one in, and why did I put the first one in? Because I had a spiritual malady that I needed relief from, and I don't even really think about it. Next thing you know, he's drunk. Thus started one more journey to the asylum for Jim. Here was the threat of commitment, the loss of family and position, to say nothing for the intense mental and physical suffering which drinking always caused him. He had much knowledge about himself as an alcoholic. He knew everything about being an alcoholic. He couldn't drink. He would lose all the shit, so he had all this information. Yet all reasons for not drinking were easily pushed aside in favor of what? The foolish idea that he could take whiskey if he only mixed it with milk. There is the thought that precedes the first drink. He has the thought of drink, and then some lame excuse matches it. That's how quick we will pick up a drink. And he actually had 3 thoughts, okay? He had the thought of whiskey in milk wouldn't hurt him on a full stomach. But I'm only focused on the first 2 thoughts. Although he had 3, so he sealed the deal with, it won't hurt me on the full stomach. And it seems like ridiculous, right? It seems ridiculous that it would happen that stupid and that quick. But that's how it happens. Whatever the precise definition of the word may be, we call this plain insanity. How can such a lack of proportion of the ability to think straight be called anything else? And that's why we need God, okay? Because we have no effective mental defense. I get the thought of drink when I'm spiritual, not well. I don't have a working God in my life. I get the thought of drink and I match it, I marry it with some stupid friggin' excuse. So then I go ask Jim, well, why'd you drink? He's going to say, well, I don't know. I don't really know why I drank. And it talked about that in there as a solution. Sometimes he's, therefore, the main problem in the alcoholic center is in his mind rather than body. If you ask him why he started on the last bender, the chances are that he will offer you one of 100 alibis. Think of one of your benders, right? Knowing everything you knew about yourself, okay? And if I ask you, you're going to offer me one of 100 alibis. Why? Because we got to have an excuse of why we picked up the drink. The wife was on my back. Work was tough. The kids had gotten to me. And, all these things piled up on me. But sometimes these excuses have a certain plausibility. They kind of make sense. But none of them really make sense in the light of the havoc an alcoholic's drinking bout creates. Okay? Once in a while, he may tell the truth. And the truth, strange to say, is that he usually has no more an idea why he took the first drink than you have. We don't. We don't have a good excuse. We know. But we don't have an effective mental defense. We can't bring into our mind the pain and suffering of a day, a week, a month ago. We don't remember what alcohol does to us. We only know the feeling that it has for us when we get the ease and comfort of the first few drinks. So I got to stop the spiritual malady so that I don't succumb to the desire again. Okay, so we're going to keep going. But basically, thought of drink, lame excuse. Jim, it was drink, milk. And then he capped it off with on a full stomach. Like how silly, how stupid. But that's how quick it happens. And one of the things that I found is anyone that struggles with anger, once you go into an unkind tirade or you get into a low level of consciousness with anger, you've lost the ability to proportion anything properly. And through the anger, you don't think straight and you will make the excuse so quick and the next thing you know, you're drunk. So we talk about the serious character flaws that made problem drinkers of us in the first place, flaws that must be dealt with or we will retreat in alcoholism once again. Anger has to be dealt with. All through the big book, it's a no-go. Like anger has to be dealt with. Resentment, anger, indignation, smugness, whatever it is, because that shit puts you in a lower state of consciousness and then you roll forward in anger and drink always looks good. Always. Page 52, middle paragraph. This is the step 0 promises. The promises you're guaranteed to come here with. And if you don't work a program with a working God in your life, you're guaranteed to have these promises in a working program. And if you keep working a program with these working step 0 promises, then you will probably eventually pick up a drink. But there's a solution at the end of this. So we had to ask ourselves, why shouldn't we apply to our human problems the same readiness to change our point of view? Here we go. There's 8 of them. We were having trouble with personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional natures, including anger, including crying, including whatever it is. We were prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. There they are. Was not a basic solution to these problems more important than fucking anything? Yes. I don't want to live this. But if I keep living this, this is the spiritual malady. If I keep living this, I need relief from this. And the only thing that cures that at this point is alcohol and drugs. But I've come so far past the point where alcohol and drugs do anything for me positive that it's created a cycle of just destroying my life. So I can't put it in my body anymore. I can't use drugs and alcohol. So what's my solutions? Well, when we saw others solve their problems by a simple reliance upon the spirit of the universe, we had to stop doubting the power of God. Our ideas did not work, but the God idea did. Boom. There we go. And I want you to go to, also in We Agnostics, page 50. Bottom paragraph. Here are thousands of men and women worldly indeed. They flatly declare, since they have come to believe in a power greater than themselves, to take a certain attitude towards that power. That means turning to the power, turning it over to that power. To do certain simple things, following your spiritual disciplines and the path. There has been a revolutionary change in their way of living and thinking in the face of collapse and despair. There we are. In the face of collapse and despair of the Step Zero promises. In the face of total failure of their human resources, they found a new power, peace, and happiness and sense of direction flowed into them. This happened when? Soon after they wholeheartedly met a few simple requirements. Once confused and baffled by the seeming futility of existence. Yeah, Step Zero promises. I'm confused and baffled by the seeming futility of life. They show the underlying reasons why they were making a heavy going of life. Step 4 and 5 start showing you why you make a heavy going of life. Leaving aside the drink question. Boom. Leaving aside the drink question, because it's not actually the problem. They tell why living was so unsatisfactory. Step 0 promises is where my unsatisfactory lies. They show the change came over them. When many hundreds of people are able to say that the consciousness of the presence of God today is the most important fact of their lives, they present a powerful reason why one should have faith. Okay, so 37, second paragraph. You may think this an extreme case, thus it is not far-fetched, for this kind of thinking has been characteristic of every single one of us. We have sometimes reflected more than Jim did on the consequences. But there was always the curious mental phenomenon that parallel with our sound reasoning. There inevitably ran some insanely trivial excuse for taking the first drink. So I can have a sound reasoning and I can have the knowledge. But there will be a parallel to our sound reasoning. There will inevitably run some insanely trivial excuse for taking the first drink. That is why we need God. Okay? Our sound reasoning will fail to hold us in check, and the insane idea will win out. The next day we would ask ourselves in all earnestness and sincerity how that could have happened. And how many times of you guys on the screen said, how the fuck did that happen? Because that's what happened, right? That's exactly how it happens. In some circumstances, we have gone out deliberately to get drunk. So this is a little different scenario. Once you have the thought, I'm getting drunk, this is what we're talking about. We have gone out deliberately to get drunk, feeling ourselves justified by what? Really pay attention. These are the things that justify me making a decision that I'm getting drunk deliberately. Nervousness, anger, worry, depression, jealousy, or the alike. Those are main catapults for somebody to say fuck it. But if you're in fit spiritual condition, you can combat that shit. But if you're not in fit spiritual condition, you're down banana peel trail. But even in this type of beginning, we're obliged to admit that our justification for a spree was insanely insufficient in the light of what always happened. We now see that when we begin to drink deliberately, instead of casually, there was little serious effective thought during the period of premeditation of what the terrific consequences might be. So if I'm pissed off at somebody and I just decide I'm drinking, I don't even think of the consequences at all. Our behavior is absurd and incomprehensible with respect to the first drink, as that of an individual with a passion, say, for jaywalking. He gets a thrill out of skipping in front of fast-moving vehicles. He enjoys himself for a few years in spite of his friendly warnings. So put yourself in the jaywalker. This is you, the jaywalker, or make it your friend who's an alcoholic, the jaywalker. Either way, this is us. Up to this point, you would label him a foolish chap, having queer ideas of fun. Luck then deserts him and he is slightly injured several times in succession. You would expect him, if he were normal, to cut it out. Presently, he is hit again, and this time has a fractured skull. Within a week after leaving the hospital, a fast-moving trolley car breaks his arm. He tells you he has decided to stop jaywalking for good. But in a few weeks, he breaks both his legs. On through the years, this conduct continues, accompanied by his continual promises to be careful or to keep off the streets altogether. Finally, he can no longer work. His wife gets a divorce and he is held up to ridicule. He tries every known means to get the jaywalking idea out of his head. He shuts himself up in an asylum, hoping to mend his ways. But the day comes, he races out in front of a fire engine, which breaks his back. Such a man would be crazy, wouldn't he? You may think our illustration is too ridiculous, but is it? We who have been through the ringer must admit if we substituted alcoholism for jaywalking, the illustration would fit us exactly. However intelligent we may have been in other respects, where alcohol has been involved, we have been strangely insane. It's strong language, but isn't it true? Some of you are thinking, yes, what you tell us is true, but it doesn't fully apply. We admit we have some of the symptoms, but we have not gone to the extremes that you fellows did. Nor are we likely to, for we understand ourselves so well after what you have told us, that such things cannot happen again. So I don't know how many times I've seen guys come into the program and get all this knowledge and kind of go, you know what? Thanks all y'all for all your information. I got this. I think I got enough and I'll never drink again. They don't know. They don't have a full knowledge of their condition. They do not understand their true predicament. Once you cross this line, self-knowledge will not fix it. And this guy might go home after the meeting and maybe get 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a month even. And he's back. And if he never comes back and actually stops drinking, then he wasn't a real alcoholic. He was given sufficient enough reason to control, stop, or moderate his drinking. He is the heavy drinker or the moderate drinker. He doesn't even need God in his life. But for us, for me, I need God because I'm not the heavy or the moderate drinker. I burned my life to the ground, 10 years mortgage, $3,000 a month, house gone, wife, kids gone, living homeless on my property, plugged in the power I couldn't pay for, went from $80,000 trucks to $750 beater, putting 80 cents in my gas tank, lost it all. I'm the real deal. I need God in my life. And I just came here because I had a terrible drug and alcohol habit. And I didn't want God. What did I find here? I found a design for living, and I would never trade it again for the world. And all the shit that I spent my life trying to fill this hole inside me with the business, with the money, with the house, with the stuff, with the girls and the stuff, never filled it up. But I spent my whole life trying to do it. Why? Because I was a victim of a delusion that I could wrest happiness and satisfaction out of this world if I only had shit from outside of me to fill the hole. What did I find here? I found the God through the program, through the steps that filled that hole and continues to fill the hole. And now that hole gets to radiate to people like you. And I found purpose. And we all will. And I know many people on the screen have. And it's a gift, man. This is really, really a gift. We admit we have some of these symptoms, but we have not gone to the extremes you fellow did, nor are we likely to. for we understand ourselves so well after what you have told us that such things cannot happen again. We have not lost everything in life through drinking, and we certainly do not intend to. Thanks for the information. That may be true of certain non-alcoholic people who, though drinking foolishly and heavily at the present time, are able to stop or moderate because their brains and bodies have not been damaged as ours were. But the actual or the potential alcoholic, with hardly an exception, will be absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge. This is a point we wish to emphasize and re-emphasize. And if I'm playing the tape forward, that is self-knowledge. That is a mental defense. The alcoholic at a certain point has no effective mental defense. So at a certain point, my self-knowledge and playing the tape forward will not work. But I don't know when that time's going to come. That's why I need God. Because I don't know. I don't know when that is. That's why I need God. So when the insane thought comes, when I don't know when that's going to come, he's able to match it with his sane thought. I need a working God in my life. So this is a point we wish to emphasize and re-emphasize, to smash home upon our alcoholic readers as has been revealed to us out of bitter experience. Let's take another illustration. So just before I move on, so I go to lots of meetings, and I hear so many people in the meeting share, I play the tape forward, It comes up as a topic on step one or whatever. And me personally, I combat it big time. Because if there's new people in the room, they think that they can combat it by playing the tape forward. The book tells me the exact opposite. So we always go to the book. Okay, you can share your experience and strength and hope all you want, but this is the message here. This is the truth. My opinion that I can play the tape forward has no place in a step one meeting because it contradicts everything this book talks about. And if a new guy goes out there thinking they can just play the tape forward, we're giving him the wrong information. And he's going to drink and he's going to possibly die. That's why I'm a stickler to these directions and to the literature. And the funny thing is, you guys can kind of tell I'm very upfront and, non-apologetic about what I say, what I think, and what I believe. But I don't get combated much because everything that I deliver is out of the book. So it works great. My ego and attitude can totally come out and no one can combat me because it's not my opinion. It's just the way I deliver it based out of the book. So I kind of love it like that. So here's Fred. Fred is a partner in a well-known accounting firm. So Fred's more of a high-bottom drunk. Okay, Jim was like a normal mid-level. He wasn't a low-bottom drunk either, but Fred's a high-bottom drunk. Fred is a partner in a well-known accounting firm. His income is good. He has a fine home. He is happily married and the father of promising children of college age. He has so attractive personality that he makes friends with everyone. If ever there was a successful businessman, it is Fred. To all appearances, he is stable, well-balanced individual, yet he is an alcoholic. We first saw Fred about a year ago in a hospital where he had gone to recover from a bad case of the jitters. It was his first experience of this kind, and he was much ashamed of it. Far from admitting he was an alcoholic, he told himself he came to the hospital to rest his nerves. So right away, he's not going to admit he's an alcoholic. He's got too much character. He's got too much, success. He can't be an alcoholic. So he's going to rationalize and kind of deny it and go, you know what, I'm just here to rest my nerves. Which is a typical trait of an alcoholic. The doctor intimated strongly that it might be worse than he realized. For a few days, he was depressed about his condition. He made up his mind to quit drinking altogether. It never occurred to him that perhaps he could not do so, in spite of his character and standing. Because this disease doesn't care about your character, standing, race, man, woman. Doesn't give a fuck. If you've crossed the line and you're an alcoholic addict, it doesn't matter how you got there. The most important thing is to just say, yes, I have this thing. And once you accept you have it, to me, there's a responsibility to treat your disease. And the only way this disease is treated is with step 2, with a God, just a willingness to believe. The best part of step 1 is step 2. And I can't wait for next week because we get into the solution and then my passion just ramps up because from step 2 on, this program rocks my world. I'm not a huge fan of delivering step 1, although it's a necessity because it's 51 pages of our 103 pages of the solution. It's like half of our literature But for me, step 2 on, that's the fun shit to deliver in a position where I'm in right now. Stop drinking altogether. No, it never occurred to him that perhaps he could not do so in spite of the character and standing. Fred would not believe himself an alcoholic, much less accept spiritual remedy for his problem. So he's totally not accepting step 1, and he's sure the fuck ain't gonna accept step 2. He's not gonna admit he's an alcoholic, much less accept spiritual remedy. Who do you think I am? Like, why would I even think about that? Is kind of his attitude. So we told him what we knew about alcoholism. He was interested and conceded that he had some of the symptoms, but he was a long way from admitting that he could do nothing about it himself. He was positive that his humiliating experience plus the knowledge he had acquired would keep him sober the rest of his life. Self-knowledge would fix it. That is so common. So many people come in humiliated because of something finally got so bad, and then they get some knowledge, and this would keep them sober for the rest of their life. But they always come back because that doesn't work. We heard no more of Fred for a while. One day we were told that he was back in the hospital. Of course he was. This time he was a little shaky. So he indicated he was anxious to see us. The story is most instructive, for here was a chap absolutely convinced he had to stop drinking, who had no excuse for drinking, who exhibited splendid judgment and determination on all other concerns, yet was flat on his back nevertheless. Let him tell you about it. I was much impressed with what you fellows said about alcoholism. I frankly did not believe it would be possible for me to drink again. I rather appreciated your ideas about the subtle insanity which precedes the first drink. But I was confident it could not happen to me because you're a unique alcoholic, Fred, after what I had learned. I reasoned I was not so far advanced as most of you fellows, that I had been usually successful in licking my other personal problems, and that I would therefore be successful where you men had failed. I felt that I had every right to be self-confident. That would be only a matter of exercising my willpower and keeping on guard. In this frame of mind, I went about my business, and for a time all went well. Boom, there it is again. For a time, all always goes well. Always. So next time when we get back to the rooms and you guys start seeing new people come in, start watching them. Be the watcher and watch them. All goes good for a time. But they fail to enlarge their spiritual life, they get drunk. And then they come back. And then they fuck around a little bit in some other area. And then they come back. And then under the lash of alcoholism, they get beaten into a state of reasonableness. They start getting the full knowledge of their condition. And they start doing what's required. Sometimes this is a tedious process. Well, what does that mean? It means it's long and painful because we think we can take little pieces of this, maybe fit AA in there somewhere. But once you've crossed the line, it's not fitting it in there anywhere. It has to be a top priority. And like I said before, it's not a life sentence. This is actually a gift. It will benefit everybody in your life and you most of all. But it doesn't seem like that at first. So in this frame of mind, I went about my business, and for a time all went well. I had no trouble refusing drinks and began to wonder if I had making too hard a work out of a simple matter. That's what people think. One day I went to Washington to present some accounting evidence to a government bureau. I had been out of town during this particular dry spell, so there was nothing new about that. Physically, I felt fine. Neither did I have any pressing problems or worries. My business came off well. I was pleased and knew my partners would be too. It was at the end of a perfect day, not a cloud on the horizon. I went to my hotel and leisurely dressed for dinner. Life's pretty good, man. As I crossed the threshold of the dining room, the thought came to mind that it would be nice to have a couple of cocktails with dinner. Boom, boom. Thought a drink, cocktails, fucking dinner. He's done like dinner. That was all, nothing more. I ordered a cocktail in my meal. Then I ordered another cocktail. After dinner, I decided to take a walk. When I returned to the hotel, it struck me a highball would be fine. Of course it is, Fred. Of course it's fine now. Fuck, bro. You set off the phenomenon of craving with your first insane fucking thought. Like, And what I find hilarious is I hear these stories in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Anyone who knows me, sometimes I just burst out laughing in the rooms because the consistency of the inconsistency of the alcoholic just cracks me up. Like, and I don't mean to discredit this disease, but it's fucking hilarious. Once you see the same shit over and over, of course you did, Jim. Of course. I can picture Jim sharing in the room. Oh, this is what happened. I'm like, fuck, no shit, bro. So then I ordered another cocktail. After dinner, I decided to take a walk. When I returned to the hotel, it struck me that a highball would be fine before going to bed, of course. So I stepped into the bar and had one. I remember having several more that night and plenty the next morning. Of course you did. You missed the part where it says I went and got a bag of blow and I got a bunch of hookers, and you missed all that part. Bill didn't put that part in there. I have a shadowy recollection of being in an airplane bound for New York and finding a friendly taxi cab driver at the landing field instead of my wife. The driver escorted me about for several days, hitting many crack houses. I know little of where I went or what I said and did, but I know I woke up and I had no money or no wallet. Then came the hospital with unbearable mental and physical suffering, and my wife was there with a beating stick. As soon as I regained my ability to think, I went carefully over the evening in Washington. Not only had I been off guard, of course, I had made no fight whatever. See, this is hilarious. Against the first drink. This time I had not thought of the consequences at all. I commenced to drink as carelessly as though the cocktails were ginger ale. I now remembered what my alcoholic friends had told me. How they prophesied, how they told him his future. That if I had an alcoholic mind, the time and place would come and I would drink again. They had said, though I did raise a defense, it would one day give way before some trivial reason for having a drink. Well, that just did happen. Of course it does, because it always does. And more, for what I had learned of alcoholism did not occur to me at all. I knew from that moment I had an alcoholic mind. I saw that willpower and self-knowledge would not help me in those strange mental blank spots. I had never been able to understand people who said that the problem had them hopelessly defeated. I knew then it was a crushing blow. What happened? He conceded to his innermost self he was an alcoholic. The gates of hell had closed on him with a clang. He got full knowledge of his condition right there. We grin when somebody finally calls and says, okay, I need to see you guys. Walk in and go, how'd that work out for you? Which I didn't like so much, and they asked me if I thought myself an alcoholic and if I were really licked this time. I had to concede to both propositions. They piled up on me heaps of evidence to the effect that an alcoholic mentally such as I had exhibited in Washington was a hopeless condition. They cited cases out of their own experience by the dozen. This process snuffed out the last flicker of conviction that I could do the job myself. Then they outlined a spiritual answer and the program of action, which 100 of them had followed successfully. Though I had been only a nominal churchman, their proposals were not intellectually hard to swallow, but the program of action, though entirely sensible, was pretty drastic. And it is pretty drastic. But it's a gift. It meant I would have to throw several lifelong conceptions out the window. That was not easy. And that is not easy. That's why step 6 is not easy. Because step 6 is where you surrender to God. This is where you throw ideas, emotions, and attitudes that have been the guiding forces of the lives of these men have to be suddenly cast aside, and we allow a whole new set of conceptions to dominate us. That's the essence of step 6. And that is not easy. And there's some pain and there's some humbleness, but the gift of it comes later. But step 6 is my favorite. 6 and 7, man. Fucking, that's the bomb of the program. So that was not easy. But the moment I made up my mind to go through with the process, the steps, I had the curious feeling that my alcoholic condition was relieved, as in fact it proved to be. Quite as important was the discovery that spiritual principles would solve all of my problems. I love that. Spiritual principles will solve all of your problems. The connection that you have with God, you will have the faith that can meet any emergency. Nothing in life will shake that if you have a solid relationship with God and God will take you through any hardships. And life won't happen to you anymore. Life will happen for you. You don't have to go through anything. You get to grow through everything. That's the beauty of this thing. I have since been brought into a way of living infinitely more satisfying and I hope more useful than the life I had lived before. My old manner of life was by no means a bad one, but I would not exchange it for the best moments for the worst I have now. I would not go back to it even if I could. Fred's story speaks for itself. We hope it strikes home to thousands like him. He had only felt the first nip of the ringer. Most alcoholics have to be pretty badly mangled before they really commence to solve their problems. And for any of you in this room who haven't been severely mangled by drug and alcohol addiction, the whole purpose of step 1 is so you don't have to go back out and get mangled. If you can relate to the literature in step 1, the first 51 pages, including the doctor's opinion, is included in that, then you don't need to go out and mangle yourself. You don't need to lose your wife and your house and all the shit like I did. But you got to accept and concede to your innermost self that you're an alcoholic. And once you accept it at a deep level, then the next thing is accepting that only a higher power is going to solve that problem. And then the kind of the carrots that dangle in step 2 is this life is a beautiful life. But you don't know what you don't know. And when you think about actually what you know, it's like this much in the realm of the universe. And what's more important than that little bit you know? All this more that you don't know. I always say what's more important than what you know is what you don't fucking know. And there's so much you don't know, which is why open-minded is one of the indispensables. Willingness is another one, and honesty is the third one. So yeah, if you haven't burned it down to the ground, you don't have to yet. So many doctors and psychiatrists agree with our conclusions. One of these men, staff member at a world-renowned hospital, recently made this statement to some of us. What you say about the general hopelessness of the average alcoholic's plight is, in my opinion, correct. As to 2 of you men whose stories I have heard, there is no doubt in my mind that you were 100% hopeless. Apart from divine help, had you offered yourself as patients in this hospital, I would have not taken you, if I had been able to avoid it. People like you are too heartbreaking. Though not a religious person, I have profound respect for the spiritual approach in cases such as yours. For most cases, there is virtually no other solution. Once more, the alcoholic at certain times has no effective mental defense against the first drink, except in a few rare cases. Neither he nor any other human being can provide such a defense. His defense must come from a higher power. Boom. So, you'll notice, anyone who's been here, I didn't really highlight the design for living so much in the chapter more about alcoholism, but I will refer way more to the design for living moving forward, because the chapter more about alcoholism is more of a chapter just about alcohol and drugs. But there is some components about what kind of thought precedes the first drink. It's what kind of thinking precedes me acting out in a defective character. What kind of relief, what kind of lame shit do I tell myself when I'm doing certain things in my behavior? And we'll get way more into that as we do step 3, 4, 5, 6, and the rest of the steps.